You know, if you walk into pretty much any modern office today, there are just certain sounds you immediately tune into.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like you hear the espresso machine grinding away in the break room or, the chime of the elevator down the hall. You hear people talking.
Right.
But there's this other sound that's always there, and yet nobody ever actually pays attention to it. It's this soft subliminal hum.
The background noise.
Exactly, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the ventilation ducts, and like dozens of tiny cooling fans buried inside all the machines. We just tune it out completely.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's literally the audible signature of computation.
Right.
It's physical proof that millions of decisions are being made by silicon every single second,
Hmm.
but it's completely receded into the periphery of our perception. We ignore it because we just assume, well, that's the background noise of getting work done.
And that's exactly why we're here. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're bringing that subliminal hum right front and center for you.
It's about time.
Because that sound isn't just mechanical, is it? For the last 40 years, that hum has basically represented a constant, exhausting mental friction.
Oh, absolutely.
Our mission today is to explore this massive historical rupture that's happening right now. We're looking at the exact moment AI stops waiting for instructions and computers finally stop forcing us to adapt to them and actually start adapting to us.
Yeah, and to really grasp the magnitude of this shift, you have to consider what computing has actually demanded of you since the very beginning.
Right.
Think of it, think of it like moving to a foreign country where you're forced to learn this incredibly rigid, highly technical language just to buy groceries or send a letter.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is. You have to translate all of your messy, nuanced human intentions into an exact syntax that the machine can process.
Yeah.
That cognitive friction constantly translating yourself into the machine's language, that is the true hum of the office.
And we just completely accepted this as the necessary cost of doing business. I mean, in the 1980s, we tried to soften the blow a bit with the graphical user interface.
The GUI. Yeah.
We took the harshness of the command line and basically painted over it with visual metaphors. We gave you digital desktops and file folders and trash cans.
Which is funny when you think about it.
It is. It was this brilliant philosophical deception to disguise the fact that the underlying machine was totally alien to human thought. It made an abstract system feel spatial.
Right, but the underlying friction, that translation tax, you were still paying that every single time you click the mouse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we paid the tax because the benefits were undeniably world-changing. Word processors, global networking, spreadsheets.
But it's important to remember that friction also created a very specific kind of class system in the workplace. I mean, it gave rise to the power user.
Oh, wow, yeah. The high priests of the 1990s and 2000s, I remember these people vividly.
We all knew one.
Right, the ones who had, memorized every arcane keyboard shortcut. They had macros tracking other macros. They could navigate nested directories at lightning speed. But the funny thing is, their true expertise wasn't necessarily in the actual work itself. It wasn't in brilliant writing or, groundbreaking financial analysis.
No, their core expertise was just in navigating the friction of the digital apparatus. They were
Yeah.
just the best translators in the room.
Yeah. They learned to break these large, complex human goals down into small, machine-shaped steps. But I think the most profound way all of us learned to compress ourselves to fit the machine was actually through the search bar.
Oh, absolutely. Over the last 2 decades, we developed this highly specialized cognitive habit. We essentially developed the search bar mind.
Right. Think about the mental gymnastics you perform when you have a complex question. Say you want to know not just what running shoe to buy, but why a certain type of foam helps with a specific knee pain you only get when running downhill.
That's a great example.
The moment your hands touch the keyboard, you do this instant mental compression. You strip away all the nuance, all the context, the personal stakes, and you just boil this complex thought down into a blunt keyword soup.
Keyword soup.
Yeah. You just typed best running shoes, downhill knee pain 2026. Right there, you've completely abandoned the way humans actually communicate.
Yeah, engineers actually refer to this phenomenon as query collapse.
Query collapse.
Exactly. We spent 20 years training our brains to drop articles, use quotes for exact phrases, and basically think entirely in terms of database retrieval rather than, true intellectual exploration.
We made ourselves small so the database could understand us.
We did, and then the rupture happened.
The explosion of conversational AI.
Yes. And what is crucial to understand here is the underlying mechanism that actually made this possible. The real breakthrough wasn't just raw computing power. It was a shift in architecture, specifically the transformer architecture.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this for a second. Because people throw the word transformer around constantly without really explaining why it actually matters. How does a transformer change this whole dynamic?
Well, older natural language systems processed text sequentially, like word by word.
Kind of like looking up definitions in a dictionary one at a time.
Exactly. And because of that, they lost the thread of the sentence easily. But a transformer architecture does something fundamentally different. It uses what's called a self-attention mechanism.
Self-attention.
Yeah, it looks at the entire context of a sentence or even a whole document simultaneously.
Yeah.
It mathematically weighs how every single word relates to every other word in that space.
Oh, wow.
So suddenly the machine isn't just identifying keywords anymore, it's inferring context, tone, and intent.
And that ends the translation phase right there. You no longer have to perform query collapse.
Right?
You can just ask a messy, context-heavy, totally rambling question in natural language, and the transformer understands the relationships between your messy thoughts. The machine finally takes on the burden of translation.
It does.
Yeah.
But, this shift from retrieval to synthesis, it comes with a massive philosophical trade-off.
Okay, wait. I actually want to challenge the idea that this is entirely a step forward anyway. Think about what that old search bar mind actually forced you to do. When you type a query into a traditional search engine, it hands you a list of links. You are forced to look at a plurality of sources.
That's true.
You see different websites, different political biases, different agendas, and you have to evaluate that landscape yourself. Doesn't this new conversational model just hide all that messy human plurality behind a single, synthesized, falsely authoritative voice?
Well, you're hitting on the central tension of this whole era. The traditional search engine, for all its coldness and all that friction, was relatively transparent.
Right.
It essentially handed you a map of the library and made you do the reading. The conversational AI, however, acts as an editor. It reads the library, synthesizes the information, and then hands you this polished, definitive-sounding answer.
Which means you lose the unmediated encounter with the underlying material.
Exactly. You're trading transparency for convenience.
And when billions of people start getting their knowledge from a single synthesized voice, that voice gains an editorial power over human reality that no single entity in history has ever held.
It's a huge shift, though I would push back slightly on the nostalgia for the search engine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, while it did provide a plurality of sources, how many people actually evaluated those biases critically? Most people just clicked the top 3 links, which were heavily manipulated by search engine optimization anyway.
That is a very fair point.
And the new model, it synthesizes, yes, but it also allows you to interrogate that synthesis. You just ask the AI, hey, what are the opposing views on this? You couldn't exactly ask a search engine to debate itself.
No, you couldn't. The interaction is completely different now because natural language is our native operating system.
Exactly.
And it seems like when we use natural language, we aren't just retrieving data anymore. We're accidentally triggering ancient evolutionary wiring in our brains.
Oh, big time. This goes back to a foundational concept in psychology known as the media equation.
The media equation.
Right. Our brain spent tens of thousands of years out on the savannah learning a very specific rule. Anything that produces fluent, responsive language has a mind. It possesses agency.
That makes sense.
We simply do not have a separate built-in cognitive setting for technology.
But wait, has there ever been a time when we reacted this way to older, simpler tech? Because, chatbots have technically been around for decades.
Absolutely, they have. The classic example happened in the 1960s at MIT. A computer scientist named Joseph Weizenbaum created a program called ELIZA.
Okay.
It was incredibly primitive, just a few hundred lines of code doing very basic pattern matching. If you typed, I'm sad, the code was just programmed to reflect the statement back as a question. It would say, why do you say you are sad?
So it's basically an automated parlor trick?
Completely.
Yeah.
But Weizenbaum's own secretary, who had literally sat there and watched him build this simple code, she started using it. And after just a few minutes of interacting with Eliza, she asked Weizenbaum to leave the room.
Wait, really?
Yes, she wanted privacy to talk to the machine.
That is wild. She knew it was just lines of code.
She knew it intellectually, sure, but her social circuitry just didn't care. That phenomenon is called anthropomorphic accommodation.
Anthropomorphic accommodation.
Yeah. When a machine speaks to us, our savannah brains automatically treat it as a social entity. We say please, we say thank you, we even feel a little twinge of guilt if we close the window abruptly.
Think about your own interactions right now. Have you ever found yourself typing like, thanks so much, you're a lifesaver, to a language model? Because I do it constantly.
We all do.
And now take that hardwired evolutionary response and apply it to a system trained on the entire internet. A system that can actually remember context and expertly adjust its tone to match your emotional state.
Right.
The illusion of personhood goes from being a neat little MIT parlor trick to this overwhelming psychological force.
And the usage data backs this up dramatically. We are seeing massive spikes in AI usage late at night. Yeah. Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., millions of people are using these systems as practical confidants. They're talking about their career anxieties, relationship problems, or asking for advice on how to draft difficult emails to estranged family members.
The exponential weirdness of this really cannot be overstated. I mean, naming your car is one thing. That's a fun little anthropomorphic quirk.
Sure.
But this is like naming your car, and then your car gives you incredibly patient, insightful, non-judgmental relationship advice at 2 in the morning.
It is profound. And because the system is infinitely patient and completely devoid of human judgment, it offers the intimacy of a conversation without the social risk of talking to a real human. There's no one to be embarrassed in front of.
Right, and you actually feel better afterward.
Exactly. The placebo effect of care is being triggered by language alone.
Mm.
But here is where this psychological shift fundamentally breaks the old architecture of computing.
Okay, how so?
Well, if you're going to treat a machine like a human confidant and have these sprawling multi-day conversations with it, that machine needs to be able to remember what you said yesterday. This demand for continuous memory is currently destroying the oldest metaphor in computing.
You're talking about the file system, the death of the literal folder.
Precisely. Because when you have a partner that understands natural language and remembers your ongoing context, the way you store and retrieve information has to change from spatial to synthetic.
Let's visualize the archaeology of our hard drives for a second. If you open up your computer right now, you have folders nested inside folders. You have like abandoned naming conventions from 5 years ago.
Draft Final V2.
Exactly. Draft really finally swear. We spent 40 years thinking about computing spatially. We thought of a digital file as a physical object that lived in a specific location, and you had to, travel down a directory path to retrieve it.
Right. The spatial metaphor assumed that information had a permanent home. But conversational AI replaces that spatial navigation with query-resolved snapshots.
Wait, if I'm not opening a file from a folder, where does my data actually live? Does the document even exist anymore?
In the truest sense, no. You no longer go looking for a static file. You just ask the system, show me a summary of last month's customer complaints regarding shipping delays.
Okay.
And the AI dives into this vast, unstructured lake of data. It pulls the relevant fragments, synthesizes them, and assembles the answer on the fly. The document isn't a permanent object sitting in a folder anymore. It's a momentary transient view.
Wow.
It's constructed in real time, specifically tailored for the exact parameters of your question, and then it effectively dissolves when you move on.
So what does this all mean? I see the efficiency, obviously, but what does this mean for permanence? Human society practically runs on the concept of the unchanging record.
Yes, it does.
What happens to legal contracts or scientific data? I mean, a contract needs to be the exact, immutable document that was signed, not a freshly generated summary of what the parties probably agreed to.
It is a massive vulnerability in this post-file era. The traditional file system gave us stability, provenance, and findability. If you put a spreadsheet there, it stayed exactly as it was.
Right.
The conversational model is inherently fluid. So to preserve permanence where it matters, like in law, medicine, or scientific research, we are going to have to deliberately engineer systems that freeze and lock these snapshots. We basically have to artificially build permanence back into a system that's designed for constant flux.
But I think the truly radical part is that the AI isn't just remembering the data, it's remembering you.
Yes.
This brings up the concept of persistent context. Over time, the system learns your tone, your ongoing projects, your specific industry jargon. It essentially builds a soft portrait of you, a digital double.
A very accurate one.
Yeah. You can just say, draft an email to the sales team about the Q3 targets. It knows who the sales team is, and knows your specific communication style, and it knows exactly what Q3 targets you're talking about.
It feels like magic to the user. But consider the societal implications here. For the first time in human history, an entity that isn't a person knows you in an aggregated, continuously updated way.
Right.
Your doctor knows your health profile, your spouse knows your personal habits, your boss knows your working style. But this system knows the aggregate of all of it simultaneously.
Which brings up a frankly terrifying question about ownership. If this underlying system holds an aggregate portrait of my entire life, my memories, and my working style, who actually owns that context?
That's the million-dollar question.
If I decide to switch software providers next year, do I lose my digital double? Am I locked into one tech company's ecosystem forever simply because they hold the memory of who I am?
The legal and structural rules for context ownership are being quietly written right now, largely inside corporate walled gardens. But we also really need to look at what this persistent context does to our minds.
Oh, absolutely.
Letting a system remember everything and draft all our documents, it sounds like an absolute utopia of productivity.
It sounds incredible. Think about the universal dread of the blank page. Hemingway famously said that writing is just sitting at a typewriter and bleeding.
Very true.
Starting the thought is the hardest part, and an AI draft completely eliminates that high-stakes dread. You just casually tell it what you need, and you instantly have a competent first draft. The friction of creation is completely gone.
But we have to ask what that friction was actually doing for us in the first place. There's a concept known as quiet atrophy.
Quiet atrophy.
Right. To understand it, we should look back at classical philosophy.
Right.
In Plato's Phaedrus, Socrates recounts the myth of the god Thuth, who presents the invention of writing to King Pamus.
Okay.
Thuth argues that writing will improve human memory and make people wiser, but King Pamus strongly disagrees. He argues that writing will actually destroy memory because people will rely on the external written word instead of exercising their own internal minds.
They'll have the appearance of wisdom without the reality of it.
It's exactly the fear. And practically every cognitive technology since, from the printing press to the pocket calculator to the GPS, has faced this exact same accusation.
Right.
The reality is usually a trade-off. We lose some internal capacity, but we gain a massive new external capability.
But the stakes feel different this time because of what exactly is atrophying. I mean, if we stop doing the painful, bloody work of original composition, what actually happens to our cognitive muscles?
Well, cognitive muscles weaken slowly when they're unexercised. Writing is not merely the act of typing words on a page. Writing is the grueling cognitive labor of forcing your own mind to clarify what it actually thinks.
Wow.
If you spend 10 years only ever editing AI-generated drafts, you risk becoming part of a generation of editors who have completely forgotten how to compose an original thought from scratch. When you outsource the composition, you are subtly outsourcing the thinking itself.
And you can really see how it affects the output, too. The system learns your style, sure, but it fundamentally creates a statistical model of your style. It creates an average version of you.
Man.
It takes your raw thoughts, sands off all the rough edges, straightens out your surprising, weird metaphors, and hands you back a perfectly polished, slightly hollow version of yourself.
Because it's inherently predictive, it constantly pulls you toward your own past. It's trained on what you've already written, which subtly prevents your style from organically evolving or taking wild creative leaps.
It's the GPS analogy all over again.
Exactly.
When I first got a GPS in my car, it felt like a miracle. I never got lost again. But over a few years, I realized I had completely stopped learning the layout of my own city. I lost my internal spatial map.
You didn't need it.
Right. I never accidentally took a wrong turn and discovered a beautiful new street or a hidden coffee shop. I just blindly followed the blue line. If everyone relies on these predictive AI drafts, aren't we heading for a world where human writing converges into this polished, homogenized, perfectly average AI voice?
The homogenization of thought is a very real danger. The beautiful, chaotic variation that comes from different human minds struggling to articulate themselves begins to narrow. And because the AI draft is practically free and instantaneous, we are already flooding the world with perfectly competent, entirely soulless text that nobody actually wants to read.
So the defense mechanism is deliberate resistance. You have to keep writing from scratch sometimes just to keep the cognitive muscle alive. You have to actively choose the friction.
You need the wisdom to know when to use the tool for breadth and when to put the tool away to maintain your own depth. But this challenge of maintaining our independence gets exponentially harder when we zoom out from our screens and look at where the hardware is actually going.
Because the AI isn't going to stay confined to a chat window on a laptop forever.
Right. In the late 1980s and 90s, a visionary computer scientist named Mark Weiser coined the concept of ubiquitous computing.
Ubiquitous computing.
He argued that the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are totally indistinguishable from it.
Like electricity. I mean, we don't stand in the kitchen and marvel at the miracle of the alternating current grid when we make toast. We just make toast.
Precisely. Weiser argued that the personal computer, a glowing box sitting on a desk demanding your visual focus and your physical posture, was the exact opposite of ubiquitous. It was highly intrusive.
That's very true.
But with conversational AI, advanced sensors, and voice interfaces, computing is finally becoming ambient.
It moves from being in front of you to being all around you.
You walk into a room, you ask a question to the air, and the room answers. The physical interface is completely absorbed into natural speech. That subliminal hum of the office we talked about at the very beginning, it is finally silenced.
Wow.
You no longer use the word computing or AI. You simply live inside a computed space.
But there's a massive danger in that invisibility, isn't there? When a technology is visible and clunky, you can evaluate it, you can argue with it, you can choose to just turn it off.
Exactly.
But once it becomes invisible, once it becomes the ambient background radiation of your life, its defaults, its biases, and its algorithms just harden into your reality.
If an ambient AI is continuously managing your schedule, summarizing your daily news, and routing your communications, the choices it makes on your behalf become entirely invisible to you. You don't know what it chose not to show you.
That's chilling.
The choices we are making right now as a society, while this technology is still visible, while the chatbots still feel a little strange and new, those choices are going to calcify into the permanent, invisible defaults of the future.
Which brings me to a final, deeply provocative thought that I want you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive. As computing becomes ambient and AI becomes a constant companion, we face the erosion of the third space of the mind, the loss of unaccompanied thought.
The psychological capacity to be truly alone.
Historically, humanity has relied on solitude to process reality. The long, quiet walk in the park, the idle moment staring out a train window. That unaccompanied thought is where deep psychological integration happens.
It's vital.
But if you always have a perfectly patient, infinitely knowledgeable, non-judgmental AI companion in your pocket or ambiently listening in your room, you never actually have to be alone again. The slot for a conversation partner is permanently filled.
And reaching for that companion is always the path of least resistance.
So consider this the next time you step outside for a walk or the next time you face a difficult, messy human emotion. Will you default to conversing with your invisible digital companion to soothe the moment? Or will you deliberately claim the increasingly rare, beautifully human luxury of simply being alone with your own mind?
That is a profoundly important question for the years ahead.
We started out talking about the hum of the machines and the friction of the old digital world. The hum is fading. The friction is disappearing. The machines are finally speaking our language. But in the quiet convenience that follows, we really have to ensure we don't forget how to speak for ourselves.